Someone you love is gone. The body is still warm. The fire is still burning. And you have no idea what death is. You have no religion, no priest, no funeral home, no rulebook telling you what comes next. You only have the people around you, the silence where a voice used to be, and an instinct so deep it predates language itself. For roughly 300,000 years, this was the only grief your ancestors knew. And what they did with it will completely change how you think about death today. Let us start with what we assumed for a long time. For most of the 20th century, the working theory among anthropologists was that burial, the deliberate, intentional placement of a body in the earth, was a relatively recent development. Something that emerged maybe 100,000 years ago. Tied to the cognitive revolution. Language. Symbolic thinking. The idea was that you needed abstract thought before you could develop ritual. You needed to believe in something beyond the body before you bothered treating the body with care. That assumption is now in pieces. In 2015, a team led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger announced the discovery of Homo naledi, a small-brained hominin species found deep inside the Rising Star cave system in South Africa. What made the discovery extraordinary was not the bones themselves. It was where they were. The remains of at least 15 individuals had been deposited in a remote chamber so difficult to reach that the researchers needed to squeeze through a passage barely 18 centimeters wide. There were no predator marks on the bones. No evidence of flood deposit or accidental death. The most likely explanation, according to Berger and his team, was deliberate disposal of the dead. Homo naledi had a brain roughly 1/3 the size of yours. And it may have been burying its dead. Let that settle for a moment. The behavior we associate with grief, with meaning, with the recognition that a life mattered, it may not require a large brain. It may require something older than thought. Now move forward in time. You are living roughly 100,000 years ago on the coast of what is now Israel. At a site called Kafsa Cave, archaeologists excavating this site found something that stopped them cold. A child, around 10 years old, buried with the antlers of a red deer placed deliberately across the body. The antlers were large, unwieldy. Someone chose them, carried them, and laid them there. This was not accident. This was not convenience. This was, by every measure we have, the deliberate decoration of a grave. Researcher Francesco D'Errico, who has spent decades studying the origins of symbolic behavior in early humans, argues that what you see at Kafsa is evidence of something profound. The moment when death stopped being just an event and started being a story. When your ancestors stopped asking where the body goes and started asking where the person goes. That shift, from body to person, is one of the most important transitions in human history. And it happened quietly, in a cave, with a child and a pair of antlers. So what did a death actually look like in a hunter-gatherer band? Reconstruct a scene. Your group is small, maybe 25 to 30 people. You have been walking the same seasonal circuit for years. You know every face. You know every voice. When someone dies, whether from a wound, from childbirth, from illness, from the slow dimming of old age, the loss is not abstract. It is a hole in the group. A missing hand at the fire. A silence where a story used to be. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent decades studying the Jew, Honski San people of the Kalahari. One of the most well-documented hunter-gatherer societies of the modern era. What she found was that death in a small band was never a private event. It was collective. The entire group stopped moving. Mourning was physical, wailing, rocking, holding the body, sometimes for hours. The grief was not managed or scheduled. It moved through the group like weather. The body itself was treated with directness. In many hunter-gatherer cultures documented by ethnographers, the body was buried quickly, within a day, for practical reasons. Heat, predators, the need to keep moving. But quickly did not mean carelessly. Grave goods have been found across dozens of prehistoric sites on every inhabited continent. Red ochre, a mineral pigment that has been in use for at least 300,000 years, was rubbed onto bodies at sites from South Africa to Spain. Blombos Cave in South Africa. excavated by researcher Christopher Henshelwood, contains ochre processing kits dating back 100,000 years, suggesting symbolic use of color long before any formal religion existed. Red, the color of blood, the color of life, rubbed onto the dead. There is something in that gesture that reaches across every century between you and them. Not every group buried their dead in the earth. Across cultures and time periods, sky burial was practiced, leaving the body on an elevated platform or exposed on rock to be returned to the sky and to animals. Some groups practiced cremation. In a few extraordinary cases, bones were cleaned and kept. The Natufian people of the ancient Levant, who lived between roughly 15,000 and 11,500 years ago, sometimes removed skulls from graves after burial, plastered them with lime to reconstruct the face, and kept them. Archaeologist Ian Cuget, who has studied Natufian mortuary practices extensively, argues these plastered skulls were not trophies. They were ancestors, people the living were not ready to let go of. That is a feeling you recognize. Here is the counterintuitive twist that most people miss when they think about prehistoric death rituals. We tend to assume that ancient humans were more fatalistic about death. That short, brutal lives made them numb to loss. That without the comfort of organized religion, death was simply accepted as a blunt fact. The archaeological record says the opposite. The more researchers excavate and analyze prehistoric burial sites, the more evidence they find of something that looks unmistakably like love. Flowers at Shanidar Cave in Iraq, first reported by Ralph Seletsky in the 1970s. Though the interpretation remains debated, suggest that Neanderthals may have placed blossoms with their dead 60,000 years ago. A toddler at a site in Kenya, Panga ya Saidi, buried 78,000 years ago with its head resting on a cushion, possibly made of vegetation. The care taken with that child's body, the deliberate positioning, the support placed under the head, is indistinguishable from what a parent would do today. Your ancestors did not have less grief than you. They may have had more. Without hospitals that sanitize death, without funeral homes that absorb it, without the philosophical frameworks that package it, they faced it directly, with their hands, in the dark, with the people they loved standing beside them. And then they got up and kept walking. That is the part that is hardest to sit with. After the wailing, after the burial, after the ochre and the antlers and the grave goods, the band moved on. They had to. Survival demanded it. The archaeologist Nicholas Kennard, who has spent years studying Upper Paleolithic behavior in Europe, notes that mobility was not a choice for most prehistoric groups. It was a requirement. You could not stay by the grave. You could not build a monument. You took the memory with you. Which means every story you carry about someone you have lost. Every time you catch a gesture in a stranger that reminds you of them. Every time you use a phrase they used. Every time their voice surfaces in your head uninvited. You are doing something your ancestors did on foot. Across savannas, for hundreds of thousands of years. Memory was the monument. There were no headstones, no recorded names, no dates carved in stone. Just the living carrying the dead inside them, season after season, until those people too became part of the silence. You have been doing this longer than you know. The fire is still burning. Someone you love is gone. And somewhere, in a layer of the earth that no one has found yet, a hand that looks a great deal like yours placed something beside a body that mattered. Not because a god commanded it. Not because a tradition required it. But because even 300,000 years ago, your ancestors already understood that a life well lived deserves a moment before the world moves on. Someone you love is gone. And across every century between you and them, the only thing that has never changed is what you feel right now.